Hi, I'm Hannah England. I'm a former international 1500 metre runner. I got a world championship silver medal in the 1500 in 2011 and also fourth place in 2013 and did the London 2012 Olympics in between. Thanks to AW for having me involved, and thank you to everyone that sent in their questions. So I'm going to work through the questions. So the first one is, what was your mentality going into major championships and the feeling just before a race? So for me, nerves was a really big part of my career. I really struggled with it quite a lot when I was younger. It probably came to a head probably around 2010. I feel like I really underperformed at the European Championships that year and the Commonwealth Games that year. And that was something was really hard to deal with. And so I started working with a sports psychologist that really helped me, and I think really shifted my mentality for those big races later in my career. For me, it was all about trying to interrupt negative thoughts. I could get really sort of frantic and fraught, waste a lot of energy, and just sort of throw away races because I wasn't in the right headspace. So my mentality was about just trying to be really organized and trying to plan out stuff to allow me to be in control, and then focus on getting out my best performance. In a nice way, I'd go into a major championships trying to remember that it was an awesome opportunity. And like, who else gets to line up and compare themselves to everyone else in the world like on one day? I'd always try and see it as a really great opportunity like that. But I'd really make a meticulous race plan with my coach, and I'd really focus in on that and kind of try and positively focus on that instead of some of the wider picture where I might get nervous and I might start comparing myself to my competitors. So the second question is, in your career, what do you believe are the three most important pieces of advice you received from your coaches? I think that's quite an interesting question. I wonder if that's from a coach that's trying to think if they can say the right thing. So I'm really lucky. I had the same coach from when I was 14 until I was 33 when I retired, Bud Baldaro. I was really enjoyed working with him through all the sort of parts of my career as I progressed. So I'd say that the first piece of really good advice he gave me was to just stay in the sport. And that was the most important thing to tell sort of me when I was 15, 16, 17, when there were a lot of other things going on in my life that were potentially more attractive and easier than dedicating myself to athletics. Instead of sort of criticizing those or forcing me into a level of sort of dedication and commitment that I wasn't ready for, Bud put a really strong focus on just staying in the sport. And I can't tell you how many times my dad would drive me from Oxford to Birmingham and we'd meet Bud, and that's what he'd say over and over again: just stay in the sport. He'd say, if you stay in the sport, you could be really good. I didn't really give it much thought until I was older, and I could reflect on the importance of that it wasn't about winning English schools or trying to get age group GB vests. It was about staying in the sport until I was a senior. Another piece of really important advice Bud gave us as a squad would be, it sounds kind of cheesy, he'd say, don't be afraid of the watch. And he says that an awful lot, and he still says it to the athletes down at the track now. And for me, that was often two-sided. It would one be about reacting to the watch if it said what you didn't want it to say. I'm sure many athletes have been there. You'd be running along and you check your watch when you come through the 400, and what it says on your watch totally controls your emotional response to what's going on. And I think Bud was a really big advocate of just ignoring that, and that being one part of the session, not the whole part of the session. But he'd also use, if we set ambitious times, he would say it then as well. He'd say, just have a go. Don't be afraid of the time. Don't be afraid of the watch. Don't let that become part of your psyche or part of how you apply yourself to this session. And then I'd say, like, the final kind of mantra that Bud would say to us would be, if in doubt, stay out. And it's a really important thing, I think, at every stage of athletics. I think everyone's dealt with niggles and perhaps pushed them too far and turned them into injuries. For me, sort of overtraining was a big issue. My immune system and my central fatigue would break down perhaps more than my muscles and my tendons. But in terms of actual injuries or kind of internal fatigue and that sort of thing, it was always really important, if there was any doubt, to stay out. It was a really easy, quick thing for our group to consider mid-session as well. If someone was saying, "Oh, I'm not sure how it feels," you'd, if in doubt, stay out. And okay. So that was something we'd use as a group. But I feel I've narrowed it down to 3 okay, but probably forgetting some good ones as well. So the next question was, what do you think about during a race? So as I touched on in the first question, nerves was quite a big thing for me. I would find it quite hard to stay present in a race. I would, like I said before, sort of had negative thoughts. You can always spiral into that negativity. And actually it's something that's quite common for a lot of athletes, I think, is you almost start to think ahead of yourself, like what are the consequences of this performance? You know, if I have a stinker here and I don't make a final, or I perform badly and I don't get selected for something, you start thinking about what the possible consequences of your performance could be, rather than just focusing on the actual important thing, which is the performance. So to help me try and stay present in a race, like I touched on before, I would have a race plan with my coach, with Bud. And sometimes these things, they'd sound pretty innocuous. They're quite internal. It would just be running tall, or running with good form. Sometimes it would be tactical, be sort of coming into the bell. It would be swinging wide to try and get a good position into the bell. But I just needed something maybe every 30 or 40 seconds in an 800 or 1500, just to help me stay present and stay positive. And I found the more I trained that, my mentality like that, the more I could just unleash a really good performance on the track. So that would be what I was thinking about during a race. It was kind of, it sounds quite clinical, but for me, removing the emotion from my mind during performance would actually unleash a better performance. I wasn't the kind of person that'd be, take them down the home straight, beat them, all that. That would kind of stress me out and not sort of allow me to relax and produce a really good performance. The next question is, who will win in a 100-meter sprint, from Niall Fleming? Me, always, forever and always, Niall. You will never beat me in a 100-meter sprint. I don't think you ever have. Next question, what do you try and bring to your role in the BBC Athletics commentary team? And what have you learned so far from the events you've worked on? I've been really lucky to do some commentary with the BBC in the last year. It's really is way harder than I think people think it is from home. I am an avid armchair commentator. I will very often have friends over for a Diamond League and we will sit there and commentate. So, you kind of think, oh yeah, I've got great opinions, I've got great insight, but transferring that in a studio is really tricky. I think the biggest thing I've had to learn so far is that you often have a producer talking in your ear. Not always to you, but to the team, kind of saying, next we're going to the high jump, next we're going to the long jump, or the results are about to come up, you need to finish talking. And that has been a real challenge for me, to kind of listen to that instruction while keeping a coherent thought. So that's been the biggest thing I've learned so far. In terms of what I try and bring to it, I think I just learned like so much from the guys that do it already. And I think it's just about trying to add a little bit of maybe tactical insight into the 8s and the 15s. Like, I love 800s and 1500s. I could sit there and analyze tactics all day long. So I really enjoy trying to know maybe what the people in the field have done through that year or through their career, and trying to apply that to the race that's in front of you. But it's a work in progress, and hopefully I'll get the opportunity to practice a bit more. So the next question is, what would you say was your career highlight and proudest moment, and talk us through your best race? So career highlight would have to be a silver medal at the World Championships. Still am incredibly proud of that. I think potentially the thing I'm proudest of, probably in most of my championship performances, was the fact that I would outperform my ranking. I think for Daegu in 2011, I was ranked 11th and came second. That's kind of cool. And I think in Moscow, it was something similar. I think I was ranked like 15th and I came 4th. So that was always something I found quite cool. Like, I enjoyed the fact that I could outperform in championships. My best race, I was trying to think about this before. It's really hard to pick one. I might have to go for NCA outdoor 1500 meter title that I won in 2008. I spent a year out as a scholarship as a scholar at Florida State University. And it was a real privilege to go there and just hit the ground running athletically. And I won the indoor championships and the outdoor championships at the NCA. But the outdoor race was tactically really perfect. It is on YouTube somewhere if people have spare time on their hands, if they're still if the world's not opened up to them quite yet. I positioned myself really well, managed to stay calm and cover all the right moves. We actually had a lady called Sally Kipyego that went on to get a silver medal in the Olympics. she was a really 5K girl. So it was just sort of about trying to hold on to Sally and have a really good sprint finish. But yeah, and I sort of kicked away from her in the last 50 to run a PB. It was a 6-second PB to go from 4:12 to 4:06 to run an Olympic A standard and win the NCAs and what was an NCA record at the time. So that for me, yeah, it doesn't get much better than that. So the next question, well, maybe it gets slightly better with a silver medal at the World Champs, but hey. The next question I've got is, how do you think we can make sure the coverage of women's athletics, long distance in particular, is as well informed as the men's and gets equal airtime when mixed races resume? I think I see athletics as quite a gender equal sport. Perhaps I'm lucky, perhaps I haven't experienced sort of that disparity between the coverage of different genders. But perhaps, yeah, it is there in the longer distance. I always feel in athletics, I quite like the way that we potentially follow personalities and we follow kind of interesting races rather than it being whether it's a man or woman. I think, for instance, like football's quite a long way behind that. There's a much heavier bias towards men's football than women's, and I don't think we have as much of a difference in athletics, but perhaps I'm being naive. For me, I do think broadcasters and journalists have a responsibility to consciously ensure that they're covering men's and women's sport the same. And often I think that needs to be about seeking out those stories that can add an entertainment value for the audience. So yeah, perhaps you can't just sit there and rely on the race action being exciting enough. Perhaps you need to have something a bit more up your sleeve. So, and I think athletics is a fantastic sport. I think if you look at any discipline and any field, if you do your research, there's interest in there. So it's just about trying to prepare and present that. There's always rivalry. If you look at women's 10,000 meters, you'll find a rivalry. You'll find someone that's got an inspirational story. You'll find something that you can capture the audience with. So potentially it's stuff like that to add value to the action that you're seeing on the screen. The next question I have is, what is your favourite thing about Birmingham, and is it in the north or the south? I think it's in the north. I grew up in Oxford. I mean, obviously, technically, it's the Midlands, but I think it feels a bit more northern to me than a bit more southern. My favourite thing about Birmingham is how people underestimate it. I think people don't think there's much going on in Birmingham, and for me, it's a total opposite. Everything like culturally, if you look at, we've got a massive music scene, we've got the massively brilliant retail stuff in town with the bull ring, but we've also got a lot of food stuff going on. I'm quite a foodie, and I feel like we've got a lot of independent restaurants and cafes and bars that you can just make the most of. And I think time and time again, people come to Birmingham and go, wow, I didn't expect that to be here. So I think that's what I love, that it's almost like a kind of secret that no one else is aware of. And I love it when I have friends or family come and visit and I can show it off. And it's also got some great running as well. I think people kind of think of it as an industrial town, but it doesn't take long to get on the canal and get out in the countryside. So the next question is, how on reflection do I feel about being eliminated in the semi-finals of London 2012 1500, an event which had a final that has gone down as arguably the dirtiest race in history? The short answer is really frustrated. That whole year was massively frustrating for me. I actually got injured in May. And had to miss a period off. I got spiked in my Achilles, got blood poisoning, really had a very disruptive injury too late in an Olympic year. Was coming off a silver medal the year before, and that was a massive breakthrough, and I suddenly had this privilege of preparing for a home Olympics when I was an outside medal shot, or I could get in that final and have a go. So the first frustration was having an injury really disrupt that. And immediately after the event, I kind of felt, well, look, when I was stuck in a hospital bed for a while, I had this blood infection. I did well to make the start line. I ran 4:05 when I was there, which is not shabby in a championship performance. So I sort of walked away saying, could have been worse. I could have not gone at all. At least I got to go. At least I got to race twice. At least I was a part of a home Olympics. But as time went on and quite the volume of positive tests that came out of that championships as a whole, and then specifically the women's 1500, It has been really hard to kind of accept the fact that despite a really bad injury, I still could have made that final, but I didn't because there were a lot of people there cheating. I remember watching the final. I think I was probably 2 or 3 gin and tonics in with my little sister who bought tickets, but we decided that was the only way to go and watch a final that you wanted to be a part of. I remember sitting there and going, I'm not even that disappointed I'm not in it, because of the fact that I couldn't believe in the first 2 people that crossed the line. They'd already failed drugs tests, the 2 Turkish women that came first and second. So I already had like a high level of suspicion. But watching the race, I kind of thought, I can't even relate to that. There was a part of me that's like, I don't even want anything to do with that, because it doesn't inspire me. It doesn't excite me like what I'm watching right now. It was really hard for me to see Morgan Usney fall over at the bell. She was a good friend of mine. I did lots of training camps with her, and she's like a lovely mentor and friend through my career. And I really felt like anyone that was watching Women's 1500 at that time, Morgan was a phenomenal racer. And I really felt that Morgan could have beaten those girls. She was potentially the only person that could beat those girls despite the fact they were cheating. So when she fell over at the bell, I was like, well, this is just, it just felt so cruel. Because what I would have loved, and what I've had in my own career with my own performances, is when a clean athlete beats the dirty ones anyway, and you kind of go, well, up. No, I can't really say that. You kind of say like, well, you've cheated and you still get beaten by a clean athlete, like that. That's really satisfying to me. So that race in London 2012 was just really frustrating to watch in the instance. But then as it's unfolded, just worse than I could have ever imagined, actually sitting there and watching it. I can be sort of a naively optimistic person. I remember starting my career in probably 2008, 2009, and people saying all the Russians are on drugs. I'm like, they can't all be on drugs. Like, not all of them, not those nice girls that I warm down with, or, that say well done to me afterwards or shake my hand. Like, they can't all be on drugs. And then as my career unfolded, and especially the revelations we've had in recent years as well, you kind of go, okay, maybe they were all cheating. So there's it is tremendous amount of frustration wrapped up with that event. The race was run to my strengths as well, that final. It was a 4:14 for a win. I'm exactly the kind of athlete that would have lapped that up, a slow start and a burn up. But ultimately, if I step back and look at my whole career, the fact that I did manage to get a world medal, the fact that I also got a 4th place in 2013, the fact that I got to 2 Commonwealth Games, numerous European Championships, it's not a massive overriding sort of legacy for me, that London 2012 experience, but it is frustrating. Like I say, I'm lucky I got the medal. I've got lots of teammates in the British team and across the world in the sport that robbed of a medal at all, or robbed of any finals. So I'm glad I got some of them. So the next question is, with regards to training, do you believe the best foundation for 800, 1500 is hard 5K training, and the key to success is hard speed endurance training? It's quite a specific question. I think for me, I didn't race an awful lot of cross country. And I think people talk about the need to be tough and be a cross country runner to achieve an 8 and a 15. And I think I had a lot of people that assumed that I wasn't of that school of thought because they wouldn't see me in a cross country race. But I would spend a lot of the winter joining, and we had a big group at the University of Birmingham that I always trained alongside. And I would join in all the cross-country sessions on that. I'd be doing 8K, 10K cross-country reps, twice a week. I'd be doing the tempos. I'd be doing everything that the squad preparing for cross-country would do to build that aerobic base and to build that strength through the winter. I wouldn't race because I have a lot of weaknesses in my lower legs that would, in my plantar fascia and my Achilles, that would be really set off by racing in spikes on mud. You just think that the torsion that goes to your lower limbs on that. So I made the choice not really to race cross country because, one, I'd have to ease down into it. I'd have to miss an weight session. And 2, the recovery, I couldn't really bounce back and do a long run the next day. I'd have to take some recovery time afterwards. So I chose to do that endurance training, but not back it up with the races. So I definitely think, I mean, whether that's hard 5K training, I'm not sure, but it's definitely an over distance training. I would do that from September right through to December, perhaps longer if I wasn't doing an indoor season. In terms of speed endurance training, for me, that means sort of the 1500 meter, the 800 meter type reps of quite short recovery. I think that's very important as you move towards the track season. As sort of a rule of thumb, Bud and I would aim for maybe 3.5, 4K worth of volume at 1500 meter pace. Whatever, whether that be made up of 300s, 400s, 600s, off quite short recovery. And then we do maybe a mile to 2K of 800 meter paced reps, separate sessions. Those aren't the same sessions, separate sessions. But yes, really sort of found running at race pace off short recovery was very important to prepare me physically to do those races. We also enjoyed, my favourite would probably be doing that sort of under distance over speed training. Just like 150s and 200s and stuff like that. And for me, like one of the favourite things about being an 800 and 1500 metre runner is that you have to be abreast of all those different training elements. I've really enjoyed that variation in the week, that you couldn't really totally neglect. There would be no time in the year when I wouldn't be in touch with speed or in touch with endurance. Maybe September I'd let the endurance go and just keep the speed going for the last 2 races of the season. But it was important to do my weight training, do my drills, do my sprints, do my long runs, do my tempo. And I enjoyed tying all that together and the variation that brought. So the next question is, what advice would you give someone struggling to come back from injury? I think the thing I found most useful about returning from injury was it's a really hard thing to do, but try and remove yourself from the timeline that's going on in the rest of the athletics world. I think it's very important to listen to your body and how your rate of recovery is going, and move through those different steps of a comeback or recovery from injury in response to how your body's feeling, not in response to the fact that it's the road relays in 2 weeks or English schools qualifiers coming up. Like you can't, I think if you pander to the calendar rather than what your body's doing, then the likelihood is that you'll move through that return from injury too fast and probably unsuccessfully and end up injured again. That would be sort of the practical training advice. Mentally, injury can be incredibly hard. I think as athletes in athletics, you're very used to getting positive reinforcement almost every time you go to training, whether that just be a run or whether that be a track session or a rep session. I think we're almost spoiled and bombarded by positive feedback. And I think when you flip the coin and take someone away from running and put them in cross training or in no training at all, it can be really, really hard mentally when you're used to that normal environment when you're training with a lot of positive feedback. So I found it very important to remember to reward myself for what I was doing. The 30-minute bike is nowhere near as fun as a 30-minute run. So I wouldn't enjoy it, and then I wouldn't give myself any credit for it. So I'd sort of work to retrain the way that I valued what I was doing, because it's very easy to sit there and go, well, it wasn't a track session or it wasn't my long run, instead of saying what it was and sort of giving yourself a pat on the back and being positive. And I think, I think that's important. And I think it's important for actually successfully coming back from an injury. And more importantly, like not getting as negative when you have one. I think, it's a really dark, frustrating place when you're injured. And I think it's important to consciously put mechanisms in there to alleviate that even a tiny bit. It's easier said than done. And it can be very, very frustrating to watch other people doing what you want to do, or feeling like you haven't got the chance to show off all the training you've done or your talent because you've been interrupted by an injury. But I think, it's a bit about acceptance, a bit about patience, and then just being kind to yourself as well, and trying to choose those small wins. Whether you've managed to run 16 minutes when you only managed 14 2 days ago, that's still a win. And it's sort of championing that instead of thinking that you want to be doing 30 minutes. So the penultimate question I have today is, if you didn't run, which other athletic sport event would you have done instead? People always think I'm being falsely modest when I say this, but I'm genuinely atrocious at any pretty much any sport apart from running. If you add in any equipment like a ball or a bat or a racket, it gets pretty ugly pretty quickly. I was a very enthusiastic team sport player at school, and I'd get into the school team just on effort, not on any talent or any skill. So I'd love to have been good at something like tennis. Like, I really enjoy watching tennis, but I'm just not. I was a really keen ballet dancer. That was, again, there's no other equipment, so I could handle ballet. That was sort of my big passion, probably until I was about 16 or 17. I really did I trialed for ballet schools, so I would really have loved that to have been an alternative if I didn't make it as a runner. Perhaps I could have been like a professional ballet dancer in a company and touring and that sort of thing. In terms of event within athletics, like I say, I just intimidate by anything that involves equipment. So yeah, I would have to have been like a 400 flat, something like that. So my last question I have is, do I feel that the UK Athletics Commission, the UK Athletics Athletes Commission, gives a genuine voice to athletes, and how could it be improved? So for any of you that aren't familiar with the Athletes Commission, there's 12 of us. We are elected by athletes that have competed for GB in the last 6 years. We run quite an active campaign with the elections. I think we had 21 people for 4 spots this year, or 5, something like that. So it's very competitive to get onto the Athletes Commission. I'm the chair of the Athletes Commission. I've done that since we started 3 or 4 years ago. I think we have the potential to have a genuine voice. We're a very diverse group. We've got 4 para members, 8 able-bodied members, so we think we represent both those communities well. And then we've got the whole breadth of the events covered in that. We've actually got it written into our terms of reference on purpose, so that we don't end up as all endurance runners just giving you one opinion. We try and have a really broad spectrum of opinions in there. And what I love, so we've got 2 triple jumpers. We've got Naomi Ogbeta and Nathan Douglas, but they're totally different ends of their career. So you've got Naomi right at the start, sort of trying to break through into her first Olympic team. And you've got Nathan, who's seasoned veteran, having already competed at the Olympics. And I really like the fact that, so you've got one event there, but we've actually got very different perspectives, and everybody in the group can bring something different to the table. So I think we 100% have the potential to offer a very broad opinion. I'm really pleased with UK Athletics and British Athletics. They're very enthusiastic about welcoming our opinion in. There's still progress to be made. I'd say one of the biggest challenges we've had is change in personnel. We've had to work, it feels like every year we've had to work to not fight for our voice to be heard, but put that work in for our voice to be understood by an ever-changing staffing team. So that's frustrating. You feel like we're almost getting somewhere, and then we've got a whole load of new people to start with. But the current team at the moment are very open to our ideas, and we just look forward to working with them on loads of issues, whether that be selection. Like that's a big issue for us, because that's a huge part of a lot of people's life. You put your heart and soul into athletics. Selection is a very important part of that journey. We talk about the athlete journey. We're also very passionate about transition, and how our athletes progress maybe off the world-class program and after their international career. But we have a lot of opinions on a lot of things, and we're very lucky to have people listening to them. But we really do welcome anyone's opinions when they do have them as well. We're all quite active on Twitter. We have our own Twitter account for the Athlete Commission. So if anyone's got any questions or any issues they want to raise, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you.